We have been looking at the fourth Bodhisattva vow. The Buddha way is unattainable. I vow to attain it. And we have been engaging with this and the other Bodhisattva vows in a process of transliteration, I'm going to call it, right? Where we're shifting from the Dharma as language to everyday life as language, right? So same teaching, same meaning, same practice, different words. Because it's through this process that we really bring the Dharma to life in our own lives. This is how we not take these teachings for granted, thinking that we know what they are, what they mean, what they're saying, how they work. This is how we not hear a teaching that we hear often and not go numb to it. The worst disservice that we can do to really anything is to assume that we know it. I mean, that's the surest way to kill it. To kill an experience, to kill an encounter with another, to kill a moment. And so instead of assuming, we investigate. We meet a teaching, we grapple with it a bit, we distill it to its essence, and then we try it out. Let's see how it fits in our lives. We adjust if needed, and we keep going in a process that keeps these teachings both alive and relevant. And in one sense, we could say that this is what Buddhist practitioners have been doing for 2,600 years. And so tonight, I wanted to speak of this vow, this fourth vow, in terms of belonging. Because really fundamentally, this is what this vow is about. This is what our search is about, that need to feel like we belong, that we are a part of, that we are connected and right in a very basic sense. And if we consider all the various religious traditions, probably all the way back to the dawn of humanity, at their core is that common premise that we are connected to something larger, more vast, more universal, that what we usually touch in our day-to-day lives. And it's a kind of returning to that knowledge, to that understanding, a kind of remembrance. Because in our day-to-days, mostly we're preoccupied. We're preoccupied with making a living, making a home, making a family. We're busy forming and keeping relationships with our partners, our friends, with parents, with children, co-workers. We're preoccupied with being safe and fed and clothed and happy and comfortable and loved and recognized and respected, maybe admired a little bit, popular and beautiful and healthy and powerful, if we can swing it. And at some point, hopefully we pause. If we're lucky, we pause and we look around and we wonder, is this it? Is this the way we spend a life? Making and maintaining and raising and protecting little old me? I mean, it can't be. It can be that the entire universe exists for me, no matter how we see some people in our world act. And it's not that the universe is not here for me, but it's that there's more. And as we know, it's always that it's not a part, that it's not apart from me. And so that's what we're here to see. You know, isn't that strange that we have such a strong conviction, really, that there's something wrong, right? That there's something missing? Despite the fact, despite the evidence, once we start looking more closely, that we can't help but belong, that we can't help but be a part of the whole, because there's no place to stand outside of what is, of what we see. So there's no way to be outside, to be wrong, to be broken, or alone. But we forget. And so this is why we have a religious practice, a spiritual practice. This is why we ask and why we work to see the answers. Which, by the way, those of you who work on koans, this is really important, to sit with the question, not with the answer that you've already anticipated. I can tell when you're sitting with the answer, because that's what you bring. And so you have to fill yourself with a question and be willing to be bowled over by what you haven't yet seen, by all of that mystery. Right? What is this? And what's my place in it? And one way to think about how to approach this, this question is, to ask, like, how do all these pieces fit together? I'm one of the pieces. You're one of the pieces. How do all these pieces fit together? Because at least Buddhism tells us that they fit perfectly. And so why does it so often feel like they don't? Like I don't? Again, why do we have this insistent feeling that something is missing, that something's wrong, that something's off? Could it be? Could it be that it has something to do with attainment, and therefore this vow? Could it be that it has something to do with wanting and not having, with winning and losing, with getting and keeping? Could it be that these are the orientations, or it's really one orientation, that causes us to feel split when we've always been whole? The Buddha way is unattainable. I vow to attain it. It cannot be attained, and I vow to do it. A Brahmin once asked the Buddha, will all the world reach awakening? Or only half the world? Or a third of the world? I mean, just tell it to me straight. What are my chances here? How well will we live And the Buddha doesn't answer. And Ananda, the Buddha's attendant and cousin, who's standing right by, sees this and he gets worried. He gets worried that the Brahmin will misunderstand. He often would do this. He would jump in to kind of explain the Buddha's silence. And I've always found that curious. It's like his anxiety gets the better of him. Like he can't quite trust that the person, the questioner, can hold it and can figure it out eventually. And so for better or for worse, he steps in and he gives the Brahmin an analogy. He says, imagine there's a fortress. It has a single gate and a single gatekeeper. And this gatekeeper is concerned, and he wants to know the people who are going to walk through the gate. And so he walks around this fortress, checking the wall very carefully to make sure that there are no gaps. And he sees that there are none, not even something so small that a cat could get through. Now, because this gatekeeper is wise, they understand that their understanding, their wisdom, cannot tell them how many people will enter the fortress. They would have to be by the gate day and night. And so they can't really know how many people will walk through. But they can know with certainty that whoever comes in has to come in through the gate. What is Ananda saying to the Brahman? Why did the Buddha stay silent? The Brahman is asking the question that in some way all of us are thinking somewhere deep down. Can I do it? Will I do it? And the Buddha stays silent. Once a group of students was learning tracking from an elder. And one of them said, how can we know where to find the buffalo? Right? Like, where do they hide usually? And the elder pointed to a gas station and said, I can't tell you where to find a buffalo, but I can tell you, you won't find him over there. Do you understand? The Buddha didn't know. He couldn't know how many will realize themselves. Despite the fact that the early sutras say he was omniscient. Actually, the Mahayana sutras too. But let's say for the sake of argument that he did know. Then what? Right? He tells you, absolutely, without a doubt, you will become enlightened. He tells someone else, absolutely, without a doubt, so sorry, but no, not this time around. Then what? What do you do with that information? How does it help you? The Buddha didn't answer because the answer would not help the Brahman. But if he had answered, he could have said, I don't know. I don't know how many will realize themselves, but I do know they'll have to follow the path. Which path? The Noble Eightfold Path, of course. The path of suffering and the end of suffering. The path of practice, realization, and transliteration into our own particular lives. And so we have this problem. We can't help but belong because we ourselves are nothing but belonging. We are nothing but relationship, entanglement in the best sense of the word, interdependence. And yet, we often will move through life for good parts of our life, believing that we don't belong, right? That we don't fit, that we're different and alone in our difference. Not realizing that's like a wave looking around at the ocean and being convinced that she alone is not water. How strange that we think this. How strange that in those moments, some part of us would rather be special than free. How strange that we want to belong, but not if it means like being like everyone else. But we are like everyone else. We're the ocean. And we're also not like everyone else. We're a wave. And no one has ever or will ever move through life quite in the way that you do. But the fact that we share the ocean means that we can use the same practice, the same path to wake up. So there are 4 obstacles to our inherent wisdom, to that knowledge that we don't have to do anything to belong. The first is ignorance, that insistence to see things as we are instead of as they are. Actually, our insistence to be someone, period, like to be a self, apart, distinct from other selves. In Buddhism, this is ignorance. The second is clinging. Like that story of monkeys that would get trapped with a gourd. Right? So in India, hunters would sometimes hollow out a gourd and place a banana inside it. And a monkey, smelling the banana, would stick his hand into the gourd, and grabbing the banana would make a fist, right? A tight fist. But now the fist is too big. They can't pull it back through the hole. And so the only way the monkey can free itself is by letting go. And you would be surprised, you would be heartbroken to know how many monkeys choose holding on over letting go. Choose essentially death over life. When all they have to do if they want to live is open their hand. The third obstacle is emotional distraction. I love it that the sutras actually call it that. Right, that turmoil inside. It spins us this way and that, and it robs us of our clarity and our calm. And I was reflecting earlier as I was working on this, how astounding really it is that something that has absolutely no substance, no solidity whatsoever, can rule over so much of our lives. I mean, think of a grudge. Someone does something to you, you get angry, and you hold on. And maybe years later, you're still holding on. Maybe you pass it on to the next generation. Families do this. Dynasties do this. A single emotion. And from it, all of that strife. which really puts a feeling into perspective. If we realize how much comes out of it, what worlds are created, how to hold them more gingerly, more carefully. And then the fourth obstacle is karma. Cause and effect, action and their results. And we accumulate karma from this life, from past lives. And if we're not, especially if we're not aware of it, it just piles on. And so we move through our lives with all this weight on our backs, which is really the weight of our beliefs, right? Our thoughts, our ideas, mistakes we've made, reactions we've had that we turn into habits, misunderstandings, biases. And so we're trying to get through life and we're teetering under that weight. And then we wonder why we're so tired. You know why sometimes it feels like the myth of Sisyphus. We're pushing that huge boulder up the hill, sweat, pouring from us. We push a little bit, we slide back down. We push a little bit until we get to the top. And then, boop, tiniest action, and there it goes, rolling down again. And we start over, pushing it back up. When we can just walk around the boulder, we can see there's no boulder. We put it there, and we don't have to. And then because I was writing about this, I made the connection that there is a way, to work with these obstructions, particularly with our karma, through working with what's called the 3 doors of karma or action, kamadvara in Pali. And the 3 doors are body, speech, and mind. And so if you think of them, it's kind of like that fortress and the gatekeeper. They are the gateways between us and the world. They are the only way that we interact with the world, is through these doors. And because of that, they really do require great care. And when I was writing about this, I thought of the door of a plane. If you're sitting in the exit row and some sort of emergency begins to happen, you're not just going to fling the door open and rush through the door. I mean, you would never dream of doing that. You would ideally, hopefully, study the directions for opening the door before the emergency starts, when you are calm, when you are collected, when you are quiet. And then when it's time to operate the door, you would follow the proper procedure. And in this way, you keep yourself and everyone else safe. How do you do the same with these doors? Because what we begin to see when we start to pay attention is that the way I approach each of these doors is what will determine what I find on the other side. So I can just swing very lightly through the door of speech. I can offer loving words. I can offer words of affirmation. I can offer words that are generous, that add something to the encounter. Or I can, in a way, barge into the other person's space, swearing, and screaming. The door of action, we can move softly through it. A look, a gesture, a kind gesture, an act of generosity. Or we can kick the door down, like literally or figuratively. Any action that is in any way violent kicks that door down. We can open the door of thought. Letting all of it move through us, all of it come in and all of it go out. Particularly loving kindness, for example. Particularly our wish for others' well-being. And the coming in part is important because that's the part where it's acceptance. Because the opposite is to shut down from myself, from all the many parts of me that I don't like, I don't want to see, or all the many parts of you I don't like and don't want to see. And so how we move through these doors matters. And so if we pair them with those three factors in the Eightfold Path of in the Sila or Shila category, which is, let's just call it ethical living, it gives us, in a sense, the right procedure. So studying, being aware of and studying these doors is like reading the instructions, the instruction manual. Following the proper procedure is using, in this case, right speech, right action, and right livelihood. And right livelihood with mind is not an exact pairing, but we've spoken about right speech quite a bit, so I will just reiterate that it is speech that is true, kind, necessary, beneficial, and timely. And sometimes these are called the 5 gates of right speech. They can also be summed up as 3. Is it true? Is it kind? Is it necessary? Because timely can go into necessary, beneficial can go into kind. So before we speak, we can ask ourselves, is what I'm about to say factual? Right? Do I know it to be true? For real? Or did I hear this enough that now I feel like I can repeat it with some authority? Will it help? Will it actually help in this moment? Is this the time to speak up? Does what I want to say need to be said? And do I need to be the one to say it? If we really took care of this door in this way, we would probably speak a lot less. A lot less. The second factor, right action, is made up of the first 3 grave precepts: not killing, not stealing, and not misusing sexuality. We have also spoken about this, all the many levels below the obvious, below the superficial. Right? We can kill with a look, with a put down, with a dismissive gesture. We can kill time. We can kill our own or another's attention. We can steal time or space. We can steal ideas. We can even take another's experience away from them, right? When we tell them what they're feeling, or when we deny their experience, it's like we steal that, we rob that from them. And we can fail to honor the body. I mean, there's 1,001 ways to do that. By guilting ourselves, shaming ourselves, denying, obsessing, repressing. And all of these cause terrible, terrible, terrible suffering. Once again, beyond what is immediately obvious. And so right action means choosing those actions that honor instead of harm, that affirm instead of deny, that lift up instead of put down. And then the last one, right livelihood. You know, if we think of work as one of the areas in which so many of us, is one of the primary ways that we interact with the world, and one of the primary ways that we also identify very often. So in that sense, excuse me, it works well with mind, you know, how we understand ourselves, how we understand the world. And I was writing that to me, it really requires balance, a balance of energy, of resources, you know, of gain, of profit, but also sustainability. I was horrified, I think is the right word, really, when I read in the New Yorker, you know, about the cost of using AI. It was 500,000 kilowatts per day. 500,000, 500,000 kilowatts a day, you know, to respond to, did my team win such and such, and, you know, what's the capital of this or that country, and can you make a photo for me? You know, an entire house in the United States uses 29 kilowatts. Where are we going to get all that energy from? Because as someone said to me when I was speaking about this, AI isn't going away. I know that, it's not going away. So what will we do in order to feed it and feed our desire for it? Our actions have always affected the whole. But now some of our actions definitely have the power to destroy us. And the good news is that we are on a path. Some of us know it and some of us don't know it, but we are on a path. And we have more power than we think. It is the power of seeing clearly and therefore living clearly. That's what a bodhisattva does. That's what we are vowing. The Buddha way is unattainable. I vow to attain it. Is not some abstract notion of one day I will become enlightened. I'm vowing to see as clearly as I can and to live as clearly as I can, as wisely as I can, as lovingly as I can. You know, it's like vowing to live in the light. I know that sounds a little woo-woo, but I mean like, you know, that image I give of we're in a darkened room, blindfold over our eyes, and we realize that's what's happening. You know, we're stumbling into the furniture, crashing into one another. And one day we realize, wait a second, it doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to be this way. We get a flashlight, practice, and we start looking for the on switch. And one day we turn on the light. And then we say to somebody else, let me help you. Let me show you where the light is. If you have not read Total Eclipse by Annie Dillard, which everybody is reprinting right now, or pointing to, it's in the Atlantic, I really recommend it. I mean, she's really masterful. But there's that other quote. And she said, I cannot cause light. The most I can do is try to put myself in the path of its beam. And she's talking, this is a piece about seeing in Pilgrim at Tinker's Creek. And she's talking about how you can't make yourself see. You can't force yourself into enlightenment. That's true. But as I said, there is more we can do. We can see that we're not apart, and we never were apart from that light. Walking the path, attaining the unattainable, essentially means to see that we are the beam. That's why we cannot cause it. That's why we can't attain it. But we do have to see it.